Mythbuster. It's a program related to look at fiction or factual in many stories of the Bible. Many people are attacking the Bible and trying to say that really many of the stories are not actually factual, but rather fictional. My job throughout these episodes is to pick one story at a time and try to analyze it through the lens of science. Is it fictional or factual? Jonah. I have so many questions to answer in the coming 3 episodes. Who is Jonah? Was he a real man? Did his prophecy actually historically happen and make sense? Does Nineveh or did Nineveh actually exist? And where is Nineveh? Who was the king of Nineveh? Where is Tarshish and where is Joppa? Who were the Assyrian and why were they ready to believe? And what type of fish Jonah was swallowed by? The first area that I need to cover is, who is Jonah? We read in Jonah 1:1, "Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai." The name Jonah, Hebrew Yonah, means dove. He was the son of Amittai, one of the tribe of Zebulun, as we read in Joshua 19:13. He was from the city of Gath-Hepher, which is in the region of Galilee. It is believed by some of the Jewish rabbis that Jonah is to be identified by the dead son of the Shunammite woman who was raised to life by the prophet Elijah, as we read in 1 Kings 17. However, there are no clear bases regarding this assumption. In 2 Kings 14:25, Jonah is mentioned as being the prophet of God during the reign of King Jeroboam, and he reigned between 793 and 753 BC. Jonah foretold of the wide extent of this king's conquest and the expansion of Israel's territory under the leaderships. The dating of Jonah from 2 Kings 14:25 know that Jonah lived during the time of Jeroboam. However, one can establish the chronological limits within which the book could have been written. As for the terminus antiquum, Sirach 49:10, 2nd century BC, mentioned the corpus of books known as the 12 minor prophets. There are several historical clues which seem to point to the date for this prophecy somehow in the late 750s BC, perhaps around 758 BC. In 756 BC, a plague struck the nation, followed by a second plague in 759 BC. In 763 BC, there was an eclipse of the sun. These were events of the type regarded by the ancients as evidence of divine judgment, and could have prepared the people of Nineveh to receive Jonah's message. This is quoted from the Rai Study Bible. No doubt, this depressed state of Assyria contributed much to the readiness of the people to hear Jonah as he began to preach to them. Homer Haley. There is some historical evidence that during the reign of Ashur-dan III, who reigned between 771 to 754 BC, a religious awakening occurred. This may have been the result of Jonah's preaching. In 745 BC, Tiglath-Pileser III, 745 to 727 BC, came to the throne, and Assyria again became the major power. Under his leadership, the Assyrian became the rod of God's anger, as we read in the book of Isaiah. An Assyrian tablet reads, Per Sagal of the land of Gozan, revolt of the city of Ashur, in the month Sivan, the sun suffered an eclipse. The eclipse is calculated to have occurred on June 15, 763 BC, from which many important Assyrian and later biblical accounts have been presumed. Now, the important question: is Jonah a real character? Did he actually exist? Jonah is the only minor prophet ever to be mentioned by Jesus Christ. He is also the only Old Testament figure that Jesus himself likens unto himself, as we read in Matthew 12 and Luke 11. Although some contend that this book is fable and Jonah never actually lived, the biblical evidence is to the contrary. In 2 Kings 14:25, he was the one who restored the boundaries of Israel from Lebo Hamath to the Dead Sea, in accordance with the word of the Lord, the God of Israel, spoken through his servant Jonah, son of Amittai, the prophet from Gath-Hepher. Josephus, an early Jewish historian, also regarded him as a historical rather than fictional, as we find it in the Antiquities of the Jews, Book 9, Chapter 10, Section 1 and 2. Also, when Paul wrote about Jesus, that he was buried and that he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures in 1 Corinthians 15:4, he may well have been alluding, at least in part, to Jonah's experience. But the Lord sent out a great wind on the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship was about to be broken up. Then the mariners were afraid, and every man cried out to his God, and threw the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten the load. But Jonah had gone down into the lowest parts of the ship, had laid down, and was fast asleep. Let's first discuss the storm. Probably was completely unexpected in this time or place. Knowing that these mariners are very experienced, and they were astonished and shocked to have this storm happening, it was more than likely that this was a godly or some sort of a miraculous intervention. More than likely, the ship was not captained by Jews either, because the mariners asked Jonah to explain who and what is the God of Hebrews. Jonah suggested one solution to the captain. The only way the storm will be stopped is to be thrown overboard. The crew had compassion, and they tried to avoid killing Jonah, but at the end, to avoid shipwreck, they threw him, and instantly the storm ceased, as evidence of divine intervention, to the extent they were so scared and they start worshiping the God of Jonah. Let me move to a different topic. Who is the king of Nineveh? We read about him in Jonah 3. And then the word came to the king of Nineveh, and he arose from his throne and laid aside his robe, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by the decree of the king and his nobles, saying, Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and cry mightily to God. Yes, let everyone turn from his evil way and from the violence that is in his hands. Who can tell? if God will turn and relent and turn away from his fierce anger so that we may not perish. Now let's talk about the Assyrian Kingdom. There is a lot known about it and a lot published in many articles and in museums. The Assyrian Kingdom at the time of Jonah seemed to have been experiencing various hardships. There were external threats from the Arameans and Eurythrians and a number of internal revolts within their own empire. There also seemed to be evidence of a widespread famine. Later, the Assyrians would not consolidate their power, but also overthrew Israel and Samaria in 722. The Assyrians can be considered the first true historians because they recorded and preserved in text and in art. The Persians, who took over most of the Assyrian Empire, have left few works of art that are similar in style and subject to that of the Assyrians, but very little written records. The next point is about the religions in Ashur or Assur. What type of religions? Strangely, the Assyrians, although they have many gods, they tend to be monotheistic. In Assyrian imperial propaganda, Assur is presented not as a remote god located outside this world, but as the maker and sovereign Lord of the entire universe. He is the Lord of all the lands, the king over the totality of heaven and earth, the creator himself, the father of all the gods, who grew up in the abyss, and the king of heaven and earth, and the Lord of all the gods. So that was the main god, God Assur. Then there are smaller many gods, maybe 9. I want to comment on 3 or 4 of them. The first one is the god Anu. He's the god of heaven. He is the first one, the heavenly father, the greatest one in heaven and earth, the one who contains the entire universe. He is also considered the reflection of his father Ansar or Assur, with whom he was identified. The second god is oneness, or oneness. Strangely, the same word of Jonah is in the Arabic and Islamic text is called oneness. Oneness in Mesopotamian mythology is an amphibious being who taught mankind wisdom. Oneness, as described by the Babylonian priest Brutus, had the form of a fish, but with the head of a man. Under his fish's head and under his fish's tail, the feet of a man. Some claim that this God may be actually Jonah himself, that the people worshipped him when they saw him coming out from a fish, and he looked as if completely could have been dead, but now alive. So they start making a new God called oneness, where the body is a fish and the head and the feet are of a man. The third god is called Anu or An. He is an early Mesopotamian sky god who was later viewed on the father of the gods and the ruler of the heavens, a position which then passed to his son Enlil. He is the son of the couple Ansar and Kishar, the second born of the primordial couple Apsu and Tiamat. The next god is the drag Dagon or Dagon, also known as Dagon. He was the Babylonian god of grain and fertility, who was especially popular in the mid-Euphrates, the region of the Mesopotamia, where he also controlled the weather. Now, let's talk about the king. Coming back to the king of Nineveh, more than likely the king of Assyria from 773 to 755 BC is Ashur-dan III. Ashur-dan III is the son of Adad-nirari III and succeeded his brother Shalmaneser IV in 773 BC. Ashur-dan's reign was a difficult age for the Assyrian monarchy. The rulership was severely limited by the influence of the dignitaries, particularly that of Shamshi-Ulu, who was the commander-in-chief. According to the eponym canon in 765 BC, Assyria was hit by a plague, and the following year the king could not campaign. It was customary for the Assyrian king to lead a military expedition every year, and that did not happen in the following year. In 763 BC, a revolt broke out, which lasted until 759 BC, when another plague hit the land. Ashur-dan was succeeded by his brother Ashur-nirari IV. Mythbuster Jonah. Now you know that Jonah was a real person. Ashur existed. King of Ashur, we know about him. A lot of Assyrian information and records are available. Next time, in Mythbuster, we'll start talking about the cities written in the book of Jonah. See you then. Thank you.